Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. So one of the biggest challenges you face is how can I accumulate and be well-versed in what resources are available in the community to best fit this client, and then how can I best prepare this client for the different community resources. So not just school, but then what does increasing school really kind of means, and the decline of having comprehensive intervention and now shifting into focus intervention. Are there any other team players I need to add to this to make this child's life development as successful as possible? So we're going to look into a couple of different things of what we consider when we do that. All right, everybody. Here we go. Awesome. So I want to review with everybody what is actually ABA therapy, because sometimes people get that confused. I'm going to kind of gloss over that part because I'm hoping everyone here actually knows what ABA therapy is, has done ABA therapy, so we can kind of skip over that. What is the piece-by-piece program that specifically PBS offers? Or there's other clinical programs if you ever move on into the future, just kind of understand what that means. What does a transition mean? Because it means different things in different stages of someone's life. Who's eligible for a transition and who do we recommend a transition, how we go about the process, where should your kid transition? Should your kid go to public school? Should your kid go to private school? Should your kid be homeschooled? Should your kid, and I know now the new option is, should my child do online schooling? Are they a qualified candidate for online schooling, and is the school qualified to give my child online schooling? That's going to be a nice addition that isn't in this PowerPoint, but I kind of really want to take some time to focus on when we get there. And what are some financial options? So I would like for you guys to be as well-versed as possible as understanding ABA therapy is extremely expensive. Even if you have full covered insurance, the amount a family may pay for intensive services ranges anywhere from a couple $100s to a few $1,000s. And it's usually looking like the average, I would say, that I've seen a family pay a year, if they have good insurance that's covered, is anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 a year. And it can go all the way up to $10,000. So when we are providing services, I take that very, very seriously in terms of, if I'm paying somebody $10,000 out of pocket, and that usually means the insurance company is supplementing another $20,000 or $30,000 for intensive therapy, you better believe I'm going to be there on time, be professional. It's not just because of the financial piece, but it's because I want the best for that child and I want the best for that family. But it doesn't go unfounded for me that these families are investing very serious, heavy financial costs in giving their children therapy. So anything I can find or use to help unload some of that cost, I'd be the perfect, I have no problem in kind of orienting a family through. So I want to teach you guys what is the Gardner Scholarship, what is an ESE option, what is a McKay, so kind of to orient a family what's in their best direction. You should be very well versed and understand what each of those mean, because why would we ever not want to be somebody who can provide resources for a family, especially like something like the Gardner. The Gardner right now is allowing $11,000 worth of credit for a family to use to pay for services, to pay for ABA, speech, any kind of device needed, how that process, and $11,000 is $11,000. And trust me, it can gain you access to a lot of different things. And so if you had that extra $11,000, sometimes it makes making the best decision a lot easier. Because before, sometimes you're going to be forced, and you will see in the life of yourself as a BCBA, you are going to have to be forced to make financial decisions with the family that highly affects your care. So I'll give you a perfect example. I had a family lose their job. What does that mean? They lost their health insurance. What does it mean to lose your health insurance? They were going to have to pay ABA out of pocket. Do you know how much ABA out of pocket is? It is extremely, extremely expensive. So an hour of a therapy, just from a regular RBT, can range anywhere, kind of the estimates in the industry right now, $38 to $58 an hour. Oh, and that doesn't include the BCBA's rate. That can range anywhere from $70 to $100 an hour. Multiply that by 40. Or 30 or 25. And you're going to get a really heavy cost. So we have to take very much into account what we're doing, and to understand that the families really have that. It is a really big piece of the pie that sometimes we overlook and we neglect, right? Especially when we're serving some families that may be of different economic status and stratus. Okay. Make sense? Cool. This is what I hate about mute. You don't know, you're just like talking to yourself. Hold on, guys, I just need one thing. Perfect. Here we go. So, all right. This is just glossing over. If you're ever in a parent presentation, ABA is just understanding that the laws of behavior apply to everybody, and we use the laws of behavior to make a socially significant change in somebody's life. So we use the laws of the behavior to make sure that a child or a client can be as happy and as independent as possible. That's what it means in plain English to do ABA therapy. It's the gold standard treatment of autism. And it has been recommended by tons of professionals, huge evidence-based research. I mean, starting from Lovas is the 40, the increase in IQ. There's lots and lots and lots of evidence and articles that recommend ABA specifically for the treatment of autism. Not that autism is something to be cured, and I'm very specific about that, or to be erased. It's how can you help someone with autism live in a world of neurotypicals, right? Up to now, I have all these parents who are like, well, we're going to change the world for autistic people. I'm like, good luck with that, right? Like, we're still dealing with like how to have like racial equality. And I think like autism is like this far back in the line in terms of things that the world has to deal with. So I think it's better that we equip our children on how to best advocate for themselves and live in the world that is to come. Now, it's a very particular thing. There's different terms, but you can hear a couple of the different terms for intensive therapy. Intensive therapy would be programs that provide 25 to 40 hours of ABA therapy a week. Usually that's also inclusive of speech or OT. It's also known as comprehensive care. So the insurance company will call it comprehensive care. That means a child's receiving 25 or more hours a week. And long-term would mean a child has been receiving services between 1 to 3 years, especially before the age of 5, right? You wouldn't say someone who's 2 years old getting intensive therapy has been in therapy a long time. Long time would be probably 2+ years, especially if it's been intensive services. Okay, so keep that in mind when we're describing certain things. So just so you guys are aware, in the Tri-County area, PBS offers a program called Piece by Piece. So it's an intensive clinical ABA program that's aim is to kind of really work on a child's developmental set, depending on their age and their skill level and acquisition level. To help also decrease inappropriate behaviors in certain settings, and we hope to generalize that to the home and increase skill acquisition. The aim of the program is very much so to like simulate a school environment, although you're not going to get a school environment that looks like that because it's very much based on ABA principles. It's 1-to-1. And then now we've divided it in Broward, for example. Katie leads the morning time, which is really focused on the littles, children between 2 and 4, and I lead the afternoon program, which is for school-age children, and working on kind of a different skill set once a child is 5+. Boca has a pretty open program to all ages, and I think Miami-Dade is going to do something similar to Broward, I believe, but I need to get some clarification there. All right, does everyone know where the programs are that PBS offers?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Broward one is in West Broward in Southwest Ranches. The one in Miami is in Kendall. I don't know where in Kendall. I will figure that out. And I'd be happy to share the address. And the one in Boca is in East Boca. And just to kind of give everyone an idea of where we're at in terms of logistics. I think what makes the program very favorable is that, especially in a day and age with COVID, they get to be around peers of their same age and in a highly structured environment. It's very, very difficult to simulate an environment like PVP at home. Because when I'm talking about, we have a structured for my camp, for example, every 20 minutes we shift in activities. It's difficult to have that along with the peer setting at home, because as much as you have a structured home, it's still a home. So you're not able to do, for example, tasks for 20 minutes and shift to something else. Oh, having to learn to wait in line for somebody else. Oh, somebody else has to use the bathroom. I need to take a turn. There's a lot of opportunities that kind of come along in a clinical setting that you can't really simulate at home, which is what makes it a benefit for children to attend. Okay. Awesome. Now, for anyone under the age of 5, would we recommend to transition? So just let me back up a little bit, because I'll go into a former life of mine. I used to be called an ITDS, an infant toddler developmental specialist. So that is a title and a job position that you gain working Part C. Does anyone know what Part C is in the IDEA Act? Okay. So the IDEA is a national law for Individuals with Disability and Education Act. So basically, it's a huge law that was really completed in the 70s, kind of came along, it's evolved, it's been shifted and continues to be implemented, but it's basically guaranteeing persons with disabilities a free and appropriate education. Now, that also translates from someone from birth to death. So in the state of Florida, and along with some other states, because every state is individual, but for the most part, Part C in the IDEA Act is for anyone 3, well, actually, technically, the day you turn 3, you go to Part B. So from birth to 2 years, 11 months, and 29 days, you are considered on what is Part C. Now, in Florida, Part C is run by each individual county. And each individual county has a little bit of a different model, but similarly, this is how it works. Let's say you have a child who was born premature. Automatically, the state will call Part C. Now, early steps is the other name for this, but technically it's under the Part C label of the IDEA Act. But in Broward, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, it's all considered early steps. So if you ever heard the word early steps, this is what it is. If you have a concern about your child, anyone can call early steps, and they by law have to obligate, like, call you back within 48 or 72 hours, I don't know what it is. Set up an appointment for you with a infant toddler developmental specialist and or speech pathologist, OT, depends on your concern. And your child will be evaluated for Part C services. What does that mean? Services that can help meet your child's needs to get them to have a free and appropriate education when they transition to Part B. Part B in the IDEA Act is school, just so you're aware. 3 to 22 is everyone in school. Generally, it can be run outside of school, but it's almost always kind of in that school-like context setting. So when you see kids have IEPs and all that, that is considered the Part B that's run through the school system, the public school system. That's run in turn by each county. Let me know if I'm going too fast. No? Okay. Now, let's say, and this is the reason why it's very appropriate and for you guys to have an understanding is a lot of clients come to us that way. So let's say you just have Johnny, right? Like Johnny's a little boy that you have, and all of a sudden you kind of start noticing Johnny's not responding to his name. He's not meeting his developmental motor milestones, and he's not really talking. The pediatricians, and this is kind of linked a lot more, and they've tried to do a lot of interventions with pediatricians. If you have an effective pediatrician, he should have a 12-month, 18-month, 24-month checklist. And if your child isn't meeting the checklist, then they should refer you to early steps. So you automatically call early steps and you set up this evaluation. During this evaluation, they tell you, yep, we're actually seeing the same markers. We want to get you somebody who is set up and trained on how to help your child learn. Here you go. And then they schedule an appointment for you, for someone to come into your house and help. We, in the state of Florida, use a parent training model. So in the state of California, specifically in San Francisco, they would actually have someone come from the state to give your child ABA automatically. We don't have that. And I think that program is dying out because there's just now so many cases of autism. For the state to incur the cost of ABA therapy for everyone is like beyond bananas, expensive. Or they have like different other kind of games and protocols. So I'm only going to stick to the state of Florida because this is like very evolving in every state. So in Florida, we have a parent training model, which means we have a specialist come into the home anywhere between an hour to 5 hours a week, just kind of depends the county and the funding sources, and train the parent on how to best help that learner and child. So if you are enrolled in Part C, you automatically have to be evaluated and have entrance to Part B, which is the school system. That's why some children at 3 years old will have an IEP. Make sense? Versus school-age children, which would be 5 and above.
that's interesting because I know the lady who is, I guess, like, she was like telling me about that she, like, her child is enrolled in early steps, and they actually receive ABA therapy, not just parent training.
So ABA in none of the three, there is no ABA therapy done in any of the 3 counties. Only 2 counties in the state of Florida, Broward and somewhere up in the middle of nowhere. I think it's Brevard County. I don't know. It's some one of those like weird little counties up there that I don't know about. Only they have ITDSs that are trained to provide ABA therapy. And even still, they're trained in ABA, but are not allowed to implement ABA as ITDSs. So basically what they have to do is we use the strategies of ABA to teach the parent, but we can't, what Early Steps does is not ABA. And a lot of people get confused because it is a very complex and confusing system. So when people are like, oh, I have ABA through Early Steps, I'm like, that's an impossibility, because ABA would not ever be run by an ITDS. It would require a BCBA, an RBT. It's run at least 25 hours to 40 hours a week for early learner. So I'm like, there's no way, unless you live in San Francisco that has that kind of program, that you're getting ABA through Early Steps. No. Now, if you live in Broward County, the company that runs that is an ABA company, and then they train their ITDSs in some parts of Broward County that can do that, which is really great. And we wanted that system in everywhere, but that's expensive, right? To train ITDSs in ABA strategies, or even to be RBTs, and then be competent enough RBTs to do parent training, it's a lot, right? So it's a very different kind of go sort of job, but you learn kind of a lot on the go and on the job about the system and about kind of what parents experience in the system. Now, just so you guys are aware, Early Steps is available and open to anyone of any income, of any disability. So it's not just children on the spectrum that they're treating. They treat children who are preemies. They treat children who have cerebral palsy, who are born with Down syndrome. Everything and anything under the umbrella of what's considered a physical disability is treated under that, or a mental, trauma. I had a case that the child was born neurotypical, and then he was in the middle of SIDS. So he flipped over and he was suffocating. His mom found out, gave him air, but then he had visual impairment, and obviously his brain didn't get oxygen for 5 minutes. So he's going to have a lot of difficulty and kind of traumatic brain injury from there. He was also eligible for Early Steps. So there's lots and lots and lots of kids served under that umbrella. And the hope is that if you train the parent and you treat the child early, you can graduate them out so that they don't need services the rest of their life, which is great, right? I think it is an amazing model, considering the resources that are given, but that's not always the case. We know that our kiddos are going to, for the most part, need services much more past the age of 3. And it sets them up in a way for success in the school system if they choose. So that's anyone under the age of 3. The day you turn 3, if you have an IEP, because what you have in Early Steps is called an IFSP. Do you guys know what that is? An Individual Family Support Plan. It looks like an IEP, but it's not, because the goals are around the parent. So it would look like mommy will complete appropriate and functional play with Johnny 2 out of 4 days of the week. Mommy and daddy will support Johnny walking up and down the stairs 80% of given times. So the goals are centered much more on how the family can support the child. They're not individualized to the child. So that is what is considered Part C, an Individual Family Support Plan. You get that kind of covered through the state. When the kiddo is 2.5 exactly, or if they're any, like let's say you call Early Steps and your kid's 2 years and 8 months, you'll automatically kind of be enrolled in the transition process. That transition occurs at 2.5 all the way up to 3 years old. So basically what you have to do is you call, the school system or Child Find. Has anyone ever heard of Child Find? Okay. Child Find is the corporation that works between the ages of 3 and 5 to provide services for children who are showing any kind of need or diagnosis or disability. So basically they take over for Early Steps, but before school. So let's say your kid gets diagnosed with autism at 3.5. Great. You go to Child Find, they get evaluated, and then they can give them an IEP. Because in the state of Florida, we have services for children between 3 and 5, for the most part, provided through school systems. What does that mean? There's all these language enrichment programs or autism cluster classrooms that are available for children 3 and 4. So the day you turn 3, if you are eligible for this program, you would have an IEP. You would enroll in one of these programs at different schools throughout the county. For example, a very famous one in Broward County is the Bodwin program. Most people have heard of Bodwin. Bodwin was a specialized school that, well, it's kind of a hybrid. It's part private, or public. It depends what you kind of model you go on. But they offered services for children between the ages of 3 and 5 before school for them to kind of get their needs met. So usually the program will consist of having, schooling 3 days. It could be part-time, so 3 days a week or 5 days a week for up to 3 hours. So usually 9 to 12. Let me asterisk this. Pre-Rona life. Now we do it online. Whatever that is, they do that online right now. Okay, have I lost anybody? This is a lot of information. So I want to make sure I'm going with this really clearly, because I don't even want to get.
I just want to know, where do you receive all this information?
Experience. I used to work in this system, which is why I know it. But there's no class on this. You have to just kind of know the system because you learn and you run through it, right? So then I serviced about, give or take, maybe 100 families, 100 or 140 parents. Yeah, not 140. I would say between 100 and 120 parents I've seen in the course of like the 4 years I was working there. And each one of them, I would guide them step by step. But I kind of made it my business to like learn from everyone and not learn from everyone. I wish Janelle's was here, because that's how I actually originally met Janelle's mom. Janelle's mom is a developmental pediatrician at UM. So when I was like an itty bitty, I met Janelle's mom because I was the ITDS accompanying some people to the developmental pediatrician to get a diagnosis. So she also kind of works in part for Early Step doing the evaluation. But there's no lesson or course on this, which is why I teach this class like that. So you guys can have an understanding, you can better guide your parents and get familiar with the terminology, because this is really dense.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how do you, unless right, you're in the situation, how are you supposed to access all this information? Like, unless you ask somebody who knows, or somebody like you is telling us like, hey, this is, like, I wouldn't have known Early Steps if you hadn't mentioned it, and then I wouldn't have that information to provide to a family. So how do?
Welcome to the way it works.
Yeah, I just also get some info like from parents, from therapists, from supervisors. And
you're going to learn a lot through parents. You're going to learn a lot through providers. I would say make it your business to learn everything, ask questions, and that's how I kind of started to figure it out. If you don't know this, and most pediatricians don't even know this system, which is why kind of when I was working on the Early Step side, they were trying to do a much bigger advocacy thing with pediatricians, but they are learning, like most of them know what the program is and will refer. But how it works, they could not even tell you from two. So a lot of families, especially families that aren't educated or versed in the system, do get lost. Very, very, because this is like, wait, what meeting comes when? IFSP, IEP, what's the difference? Wait, what, your kid's going to school, but then it's not getting paid, but what? Huh? Like, it's just a really huge issue, because then what happens is, and I'll give you a perfect example. Within Child Find, if your child is given an IEP, and this is a really common mistake almost most parents make, your child is provided speech and OT services or language enrichment services. It's not speech pathology services, right? That's very different than what the school system provides. They provide language-based needs or speech needs according to their educational needs. So what parents think, because of course it sounds exactly the same, I would totally understand. They're like, no, my kid gets speech at school. I was like, that's impossible. Your child does not get speech at school. Because the school system doesn't give speech services.
That is a big misconception that parents had. I always have to adjust those when we have IEP meetings. because they do think it's like a private speech services.
And it's not.
And it's all educationally related. It's definitely not what would be
So for
addressed.
example, if your kid has to learn to wipe themselves, I have seen it listed on an IEP. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it's very uncommon. And that's not a skill and a goal that they're going to work on individually with your child. However, it's an important, necessary life skill that you really want an OT, a private OT, that's basing their needs and report on their medical needs, not on their educational deficits. An IEP is written for educational deficits, not for life deficits. Sometimes they're related, but many times they're not.
So the speech and OT is based specifically on what they think they need for like the classroom.
Correct. Their educational needs.
Yeah. Okay. That's so weird.
And it's usually
So is it in a
never
group?
private. Yes. It's always in a group.
Okay.
Not always. Let me not say always.
More often than not.
Yeah. No, I would say most of the time. I would say 90% of the time it's in a group setting. Unless a child's having crazy behaviors. Like that's the only time I've ever seen it individualized. I don't know. Jess can probably speak to this a little bit more than me. Have you seen it most of the time done in group? I would say 90% of the time I would say it's done.
For the speech services?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never individualized. It's usually like maybe between 3 to 5 kids. They just don't have the resources
To do that.
Yeah.
to do it individual at all.
Yeah.
And most
Now,
of the time,
it works very different depending the county you're in. Because in Orlando, they have BTBAs on staff for school. In New York, works very different. So you have to take this individually based on the counties. I've worked in the Tri-County area. In Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade, it works all the same. So we do not have enough resources to give anyone individualized speech services. Oh, and then, by the way, if your child ever wants an AAC device, there is an AAC team that is in every county developed. Do you know the average wait time for an AAC team to see your child?
Oh.
Like years something.
A year and a half. And every school will tell you it's not a year and a half. Every single school I've ever been to is like, no, we could do it faster. I'm like, sweetie, you don't walk on water. You're not Jesus. You can't do it faster because there's only one team.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And that's the way it works, which is why I kind of really want to present a very valid picture of the program, because parents have a very different idea of what school is versus what it actually is. And what it actually is in a county, and that's not to disparage teachers, it's not to disparage counselors, ESC specialists, autism coaches, but it is very different depending on the school you're in, the teacher you have, and the resources planted in by the federal and state government.
At some point, I would even say it depends on the school and the principals who are willing to invest in this or not. Because I've seen in Broward County, I've seen like really great public schools who has an autism coach who really trying to do something, and some schools who doesn't give whatever.
Yeah. Maria's witness to this. I had a IEP meeting where the entire school got offended by this analogy, but it is what it is. I'm like, even if Michael Phelps is on the Titanic, he drowns. Because it doesn't matter if you're the best teacher or the best swimmer or the best whatever. If you don't have the resources around you to support you, you cannot help enable a child. The issue is, it's a very touchy subject because teachers work so hard. They do. And they like pour their life out for like such crappy pay. I have no idea like why we pay them so bad. And it's not an insult against them for the most part. It's the fact that we have to, as a society, and I'm hoping that COVID is kind of like the day of reckoning for us, that we're not giving enough resources for people according to the need. The need for autism rates have just like skyrocketed, and the school system cannot keep up with it. It's not their fault. It's like they have to service all these people, and so they're trying to come up with an equitable system for everyone, which basically means a good system for no one. Yeah. Right? Welcome to what universal healthcare looks like. Another story, another day. But that's the way it works. It is. This is the reality of the way it works. And then another thing that I want to make sure I explain to parents, if you go the public school route, just so you have an understanding, red tape is the name of the game. Period. End of story. Which means one change for your kid is going to take meses, months and months and months and months and years. So you have to go low and slow, be patient about it. And a lot of times parents do not understand that. But this is the way it works. You are not going to change the system. Sorry, this is the way it is. So we got to learn to play in the system. And then there's people who are like, well, I'm going to sue for my kid to get better services. Guess what? Your kid's going to graduate high school by the time they get better services. And now I'm thankful for everyone who has made the battle and who's like gone on, because there's lots of people who pioneered the way. But things take, it's a process. For a while, the schools weren't letting in an RBT. Thank God there was a class action lawsuit against like the state of Florida, and now they have to allow RBTs. I'm very thankful for every single person who made that class action lawsuit happen. However, to what gain? Right? Because now I feel like what is happening is RBTs and BCBAs are coming into schools, not really taking into account resources, and then basically we're expected to be the teacher for this child. And that isn't our job. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, here's, let me leave you Johnny deposited, and you deal with Johnny when you're here, because I don't know how to deal with him. And then what? I'm taking the role as an educator. That's not really ABA. It is, but I mean, not in that sense, right? Then are you really in the right context and setting of where your kid needs to be? Good thing to kind of know. But just so you are aware, no one who is who's 3 is allowed to go to early steps. So if you call early steps, for example, you're like, hey, I have some concerns over my kid. He's 3. They're like, great, call child fine. They give you child fine's number. Then you have to be evaluated by child fine. And then there's 3 child fines. So there's one in Broward County by the swap shop. So I always remember where it is, at Wyndham Gates. That's where everyone in Broward County, if you go to child fine, that's the only child fine there is. Miami-Dade County is split between north and south. So north is done by like Jackson, that whole Jackson Medical Complex thing. And then the south one, I think, is done at South Miami. I can't remember. I don't know. And then, say that again?
It is in South Miami. By South Miami
Hospital. They take care of, and then the dividing line, just so you guys know, for your Dade people is Flagler, which is great. Okay. I'll always remember that. If you live north of Flagler, you're in North Dade. If you're south of Flagler, you're in South Dade. So then it's easy for us to separate who goes to where. And then Broward is just 1, and then Palm Beach is just 1, and theirs is in West Palm. Okay. So just so you kind of know, you want to help be there with your family. If you have a family of early learners, tell them to be patient, that this is a process that's necessary and you need. I always, always, always advocate for a family to go to early steps and try to get resources. It's only free help and money, right? Like, why would you not take free resources and help? You may get a really great ITDS, or you may get a really horrible one. I don't know, but it's worth a shot. I always tell them, what's the worst that can happen? You have someone come and play with your kid an hour a week, right? Like, who cares? Like, it's fine. You're not going to lose anything in getting that. And then the other thing that, especially with early steps, it opens the door for your child to go to Child Fine Express. By law, they have to transition them into Child Fine, so your child will be evaluated on time and will be provided any resources. When you're dealing with a low-income family, this is huge, because this may be their only source of recourses and resources, unfortunately. But I want to make sure that like they have the ability to do that. The other reason I want to make sure that they do that is, if a child has the ability to have an IEP before they turn 5 and enroll in kindergarten, it'll express the process of whether to transition them into a cluster classroom or into a mainstream classroom. But it sets them up for success, because the school already knows they have a child that has different needs coming into the school. Versus, oh, what do you think? You're going to enroll Johnny at 5 years old in a regular classroom, and that your teacher's not going to notice he doesn't talk and he has all these self-done behaviors? Like, you're basically then delaying the process. They're going to try to move your kid wherever they can and then get an IEP going, and then it's not necessarily going to be the best IEP for your kid. It's not, because they don't really know their needs and then where to place them. So, and an IEP is very beneficial for any financial resources you may need later on. For example, the gardener. You want an IEP for a gardener. You need an IEP for a McKay. So the sooner you have this, the better it is for you financially, because it can open the door to other resources. So I always advocate for a family to do early steps or Child Fine, whatever is appropriate for their age, because it's something that they're going to need. Even if the service, you can even go to Child Fine, they evaluate your kid, write them an IEP. If you decide not to enroll your child in that school, totally fine, no problem. They have to, the county has to make sure there's room for your child whenever you want to enroll them. So if anything changes, you always have the door open, which is really great. But if you don't, it's not a mandatory service. That's the really nice thing about early steps and about child plan. Once your child hits the age of 6, not 5, everything starts to change. And I'm gonna explain why. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go to this part of it. When do I leave intensive ABA therapy? When do you guys think it's beneficial for a child to leave intensive or comprehensive care? And it'll tell you right on the screen. When your child is displaying continuous low rates of inappropriate behaviors, and these behaviors do not impede learning from a non-behavioral instruction provider. The other portion is, depending on the child's age, schooling is going to take a very big portion of their day. It is not realistic for them to be in intensive therapy if they're in a school setting, because there are only 24 hours in a day. So what does that mean? What if I have a very impacted child and he's 10? What do you guys think? Should he be in intensive schooling or should he be intensive ABA?
It's either some parents just may proceed with homeschooling. Some parents can proceed with, like in some cases, I believe insurance will accept ABA in school, but it's not really
not very common. Yeah.
So yeah, but I would probably, based on severity, if it's like really, really, really severe, I would rather do intensive ABA therapy and do the homeschool and try to find there like opportunities for like social skills training, whatever, like going to community. Like it's a lot of different services now. Like
absolutely, especially if you consider what are the resources for a child who's very impacted in the school system. It is a very sad place for a child who's very impacted. Many times they're being abused. We don't know, and that's not to accuse anybody, but I mean, I literally had a client who the teacher was extremely verbally abusive. Another parent found it because they put a recorder in a child's backpack. And so they're under stress. They're not really in their appropriate learning environment. Most of the time, they're also grouped with other children who have severe behavior needs, and they aren't always trained behaviorally in how to deal with that. So I call it basically pretty much glorified babysitting. And then because resources lag for so long, you don't have the ability to acquire the specialists to help give this child the best functionality within that age group. So now there are very good private schools that give them really good comprehensive that are based on like verbal behavior therapy. Like off the top of my head, I can tell you Atlantis is a really good school for that. That's private. SFAX is a charter school that's very highly based and is able to do that. They use an ABA model, a 3-to-1 ratio. But again, that's the exception, not the norm and the rule. So then if a homeschooling program or an online program that like a parent can implement is a better option, I would say intensive behavior therapy is even still recommended for a child who's 10. The issue is then I think the parent has to kind of transform what schooling looks like and has to be open to like doing a different type of school, because traditional public school will not allow intensive behavior therapy. It just won't. Because when are you going to give the kid 25 hours a week? When? Right? Now, on the contrary, I should also make sure that a child continuously is acquiring skills in most developmental areas. You can kind of see within 2 to 3 years of therapy if a child's, like, you can get an idea of a child's functionality rate and their rate of progress in learning. So it could be the case that you have a client that a neurotypical class with accommodation is actually a better option. So then there are many, articles that really support that interaction and assistance with neurotypical children and children with ASD is really, really viable. That's called peer modeling and learning, right? There are things that as an adult, we look and act different. We're never going to play and look like a child. We're never going to sound like a child because every child's generation is different. Their verbs and language, like my brother's 14. Even the way his friends talk look very different than 15, 16 years ago when my friends were talking. So you also have to understand everyone is also born to a generation in time, and they learn from each other different simulations and behaviors that they can learn from adults. But I also would urge that your child needs to be ready to do peer-mediated interaction and learning, which means they need to know how to model. If your kid doesn't know how to copy, what are they going to get from being with other neurotypical kids? Not much. So you got to also make sure there's a basis of the modeling, the language. Sometimes people are very concerned on the communication. I'm not really concerned about that, much more as I am as the rate of acquisition and their ability to demonstrate and modify and have some sort of context of what you do with other children.
There's also okay, go ahead. Now, there is also research about like one of like relatively high functioning kids are placed in mainstream class, and there is some I forgot the name, is some kind of learning groups. It's like a specific term for this learning, L blah blah, L something G. So so like there is a groups one, like the kind of study bodies, neurotypical kids and the kids with autism, and how that impacts.
Like mixed classrooms.
So it's like a specific like group. So like when you assign a study buddy, and like how it will affect the child with autism and how they thrive, you know, and how they really improve just because of this atmosphere environment.
So when I'm talking to a parent, because I may have a parent, this actually happens to me more often than not, with parents whose children are not necessarily ready or able to be in a neurotypical classroom, but they feel like, well, if they're around normal kids, they'll be normal. That's kind of like their thought. But I always tell them, like, this isn't a disease. It's not like chicken pox and like I can rub a normal kid or whatever normal even means. I don't even know. I think you mean neurotypical with an autism kid and the autism goes away. I do get the argument of the behavior and the verbal behavior copying. However, I always tell the family, your child doesn't learn the same way that a neurotypical child does learn. So, by the way, there's tons of behaviors in neurotypical classrooms if you are unaware. I know, I'm there all the time. And by the way, there's not people who even know how to deal with those behaviors in a way that's functional, even if it's the best of teachers. So they could accidentally reinforce maladaptive behaviors in your child not knowing. So you also have to consider that too. So a child's willingness and awareness to participate in peer-mediated learning, a specific communication and attending proficiency. So you want to make sure that their ability to attend is also there. And if they need to communicate to the teacher and those around them, they can do that. That's when I would recommend a transition into a mainstream classroom or a normal classroom. The rate of learning is in comparison to neurotypical peers. A natural environment where it can take place. I don't have to do pullouts constantly. I can't support that in a mediated classroom or have a shadow 24/7. Because if anytime, bing, 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 someone asks you to have a shadow 24/7, that's not the right learning environment for that child. It never is. It's an unsustainable model. It's a model I have to do, for example, in my international cases because there's nothing that exists. But in the US, that's not a sustainable model. And I always tell the family, run, because there's nothing that you can do. And what happens when your therapist is sick? Your kid can't go to school. Oh, and by the way, the teacher thinks you're the teacher for that kid. Or the kid can even become super dependent on you to the point that when they don't need you, they still want you there. So a lot of things kind of occur. So I always say, if we have a shadow in a school, it has to be with a plan to get in and get out. What are the short-term and long-term objectives of the peer-mediated learning? What are the parents' short-term and long-term objectives? Can reduction of intensive behavioral services even take place at that time or place? The other thing too is you need to consider whether the school is ready and willing to have other children with different learning styles and abilities within their classroom. I have had parents say, I don't want those slow kids in the class with my gifted child. Yes, I have. Happens all the time. And you'd be very surprised. And it's like, I'm not, look, I'm not trying to be culturally insensitive. I get it. But I don't need that weird kid to teach my kid those weird behaviors. The school will basically kind of give you a runaround, very nice politically, like, we're not best equipped for this kind of learner. We don't have the resources to support this learner, which may be true. I'm not saying that it's not. But that's kind of if the school isn't willing to have the child there, I always tell the parent, I wouldn't leave my own child somewhere they're not welcomed. So why are you fighting with the school to take your own child? Because even if they end up taking them, do you think they're going to be the best place and resource for that child? No. So also, what is the potential financial cost? Do you know how much a shadow is? If you have to pay for it privately, it's expensive. So think about all those things before transitioning, right? And what are the pros and cons of that? So when are children ready for school? When they display low rates of continuous inappropriate behaviors and do not impede learning from a non-behaviorally trained instructor, and when a child ages out. By the way, by law, a child does not have to inscribe in school until the age of 6 years old, not 5. So in the state of Florida, you are allowed to start kindergarten at 6 years old. And if that extra year of intensive behavior therapy helps your kid catch up, why would you not do that? I have a CBT therapist that, like, I love her to death. She's like, what is the race for everybody to finish and like be like in 8th grade? She's like, be in 5th grade for God's sakes, and just stay in 5th grade and learn what you got to do in 5th grade. And I love that, right? Because it's so true. Like, there's such a push for your kid to be academically advanced and to always be gifted and to be the smartest. And I'm like, how about your kid just be like a person? How let them teach them how to be a person? Let them stay in kindergarten learning like 2 + 2 while they're in kindergarten. There's no hurry to learn in life. So we're not running against the clock. We have to go at the pace of what these kiddos are at. Okay. So there are some schools that actually we've worked with in the past that are really great stepping stones for this. So I'll give you a really great one. So when I was doing my graduate training, there's these programs called Bright Horizons programs all over the country. They're basically these daycares. I don't even like call them daycares. They're like schools that link up with universities, and they use like the latest research and evidence-based practices for learning for children. I love those schools to death. They are amazing. They have highly structured settings, are prepared to take in learners, for example, at different learning abilities, focus a lot on social emotional development, and they're spread all throughout the country. They're a great stepping stone. Let's say I see a kiddo who's 4, who has some emerging good language skills that would benefit from being in a peer-mediated environment. I would choose that kind of school because they're also people who are equipped to help them. So we help train them a little bit, but it's also the right learning environment for that child. So you have to look, I always tell the parent, you don't shop your kid, you don't sell your kid to a school. You let the school sell itself to you. Because there's lots and lots of different options, so we can have lots and lots of great learning styles. Maybe a structured Montessori style might be better for your child. So we're gonna really take the time to look, what is the best schooling option for your kid based on their learning? Okay, this is a big point. The BCBA and the parents, along with other professionals, so if they have an SLP, an OT, a neurologist, a pediatrician, they should all be making this decision together. Of course, it's ultimately the decision of the parent, but I will always tell them, you are going against my clinical recommendation to reduce intensive behavioral therapy to put your child in school. And I will make sure they sign a paper saying you are going against my clinical recommendation. They will also be better equipped and able and versed in the area of which programs to recommend to integrate your child, if that's the option you want to go, or if you need a private school or a public school, how to better advocate for your child to get the best program. Okay, the aim of integrating a child should be maybe to have a shadow to help train the non-behaviorally trained instructor so that you can get out. If that's not the aim, your child's not ready to transition into a mainstream classroom. Okay? Simply said, our job is to train ourselves out of a job. That really is what it is. Okay. Any questions from here? Anyone? Yes, no? Maybe. No? Okay. It's around 8 o'clock. I was gonna ask, would you guys like to kind of wrap it up and set here? Because then we have the differences of where to transition a kid. Like whether to a mainstream or self-contained. What is child find in a little bit more of a specific manner? Where do you find them and all that? I can leave that for next time and resources, and then just kind of answer some questions about early steps and how things take place for today, and then wind it down. Or if everyone's like willing and able to, I can extend it and kind of finish up get in some extra portions.
I don't have questions and I don't mind staying.
Okay. All right, friends. So I'm going to give a model child here. Hi, my name is Stacy. I go to church with you. And I say, Maria, I have a little girl. Someone at church told me you do some behavioral sort of thing. You're like a child shrink. I don't really know. But could you evaluate my child? What do you say?
Can you say it again to us?
Okay. My name is, this has actually happened to me. So this is why I'm actually telling you guys this. So hi, my name is Stacy. I heard you teach Sunday school and that in your profession in real life, you work for the government, you do something called therapy, you're a child psychologist, I don't know. I have some concerns over my daughter. Would you be willing and able to see her? I'm happy to pay you.
I probably would ask if the child had a diagnosis first. If she
I don't know what to do or where to go. What should I do?
I would recommend to visit her like pediatrician or whatever to make it like we first do the medical evaluation. So I'm not the one who diagnoses your child. I'm the one who assesses her skills once your child has a diagnosis. And then we will work with whatever we have.
Okay, perfect. That is a good place to start. There's the other two places you need to go. Number one, I have a rule. If I go to church with you, I do not see you because nope. I just will not see you. I will find you the best person to see you, but I will not see you. That's one. Two, I always recommend the parent does the two things. Go to see a really top recommended developmental pediatrician or neurologist that I'm happy to write down there. I mean, at this point, I literally have it saved, so I could just text it because I've been asked so many times. And then I say, immediately call early steps so your child can get evaluated. So it's a two-pronged system you have to do, not one. It's not just, hey, go to the neurologist and go get your child evaluated, because then you're leaving out all the community and legal resources available to that child. So you want to then say, great, your kid's 2.5. You live in North Dade, call Jackson. This is the number. They have to, and they will, because by law, I don't know who sued them. Somebody did, because there's always somebody who sues somebody. They have to return your call within a certain amount of time. So in 72 hours, they have to return your call.
Pam, let me ask you a question. So like my particular case that I have now, so they were diagnosed, but I don't believe they've gone through early steps. So I should recommend for them to go through early steps.
Yep. And explain to them, this is kind of like the state process of how it goes. And then it's not, I mean, at that point, once you get evaluated and you have a diagnosis, they're not looking for a diagnosis from early steps. Usually early steps is the vehicle to get you a diagnosis. So they'll give you a list of very good developmental pediatricians and neurologists. They're not looking for that. They're looking for the services supplemented by the state. Okay. Right. And just because you have a diagnosis, by the way, doesn't mean you're going to get services from early steps. 99% of the time it does mean, but technically they have to say that. So they can get an extra person kind of to help you out. And then I make it my business, if I were you, to have and work with the ITDS that they're assigned, and to help shape the IFSP goals.
Okay.
Right? I think your kiddo is not south, right? Are they south or north of Flagler?
South. Well, Doral, yeah, they're south.
No, they're not.
No, north.
Yeah, so then they're going to go to, they go to Jackson.
Yeah.
I do not know what it looks like right now with COVID, so do not ask me. But I'm pretty sure if they call, they're going to get an evaluation. Maybe a telehealth evaluation, I don't know. But I'm very curious what it looks like now during COVID.
Let me ask you a question. So if they received that diagnosis, they went to get a comprehensive, and what happens when the comprehensive thinks that they don't have autism?
The comprehensive said that? What exam did they do on them?
She didn't give me the exact, because she hasn't gotten the report back yet. But just on her conversation with her, they felt that no, that it's just a delay, a language delay.
Okay, that doesn't exist in the DSM. So I would say you need to listen on the DSM. That doesn't exist in the DSM. There's no such thing as language delay. So I would tell the mom to tell the lady that in the DSM-5, there's no such thing as a language delay. That's
I'm gonna wait to get the report because I guess this is also like all brand new for mom.
Yep.
You know, just based on the conversation. But I thought it was so weird that she had mentioned.
Sometimes there's a lot lost in translation. So many times the parent doesn't report the behaviors. So if all the psychologist is able to report is a language delay, you can say, well, during my evaluation, 5 out of 10 times the child didn't respond to their name. There's behaviors of pica. There's these inappropriate self-stimulatory behaviors. Have you observed the way this child plays like this? What kind of a comprehensive evaluation did you do? Did you do an ADOS? An ADOS is not done until a child is 2 years old. So I start going through the list of things. Oh, did you do a CARS? Okay, a CARS you can be doing, but a CARS also you need to be 2 years old. So the problem with your learner, for example, is he's not 2 years old. So the evaluation that they need to do, probably they can't. They will run it, but it's not appropriate because he's not at that milestone, which is why they're like, oh, it's a language delay. Let me wait till he turns 2 and I can actually do that. Versus just say, hey, how about we not write the report and we run this thing when he's 2? Let's just do that.
I mean, it's only in a couple months.
Yeah.
2 months.
In 2 months? I'd wait for 2 months. But yeah, I'm not a very nice person because I also have like my degrees in developmental psychology. So then I'll start going tit for tat, and then this is going to be a very long conversation. But I would be a nightmare. Like I'm a nightmare patient in the hospital. Oh my God, you don't want me as a patient. I am like the meanest person ever. But I think that there's this like, this is what's odd. The parents that look for a diagnosis and want a diagnosis and know their child has a diagnosis are many times refuted by professionals. By why in God's green earth, I have no idea. And many times it's because the professionals don't want to make the declaration. And I always tell them what my first psychology professor always said. Do you know that mental health problems are like garbage? And all health problems are like garbage. The longer you let them sit, the more they stink and the more explosive they become. So by delaying and withholding this diagnosis, what are they doing? They're delaying treatment.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And then I say, do you want to be responsible for this child not receiving treatment for the next year? Is that what you're declaring?
Yeah.
And then the game changes, right? Because I've even had a parent that's like, poor thing, she threatened like a psychologist. She was like, put it on the thing. She has autism. The neurologist said she had autism. Put it on the paper because I want services. And then they're like, no, we need to do our job. It's something we don't see. And then but most of them sometimes aren't even well versed in what it is. So I pull out the DSM and I'm like, did you see this? Did you see that? Did you see that? Yes. I'm like, so then why would you not evaluate?
Yeah. I'm gonna read that report when she gives it to me.
But I wouldn't wait for the report. I would say if they told the mom verbally they're not going to put it on, they're not going to put it on. So then that's when I would ask for a consult. Say, hey, would your psychologist be willing and able to meet for 15 minutes?
Okay.
And have a telehealth session and tell them, are you okay with saying that this child needs to be withheld intensive early intervention? Because in your opinion, is only language delay?
I feel like what's kind of saving is that because of their insurance, they didn't ask for that. So we're able to have it, but I'm concerned what's February going to look like if they do ask for it. And then we don't have it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, and you could just send them to somebody else. That's another thing. Like, I wouldn't get too hung up on that, then just send them to somebody else. Because there's also psychologists that don't understand, like, they live in a land as if the label is independent of treatment. They're not maybe necessarily versed that the insurance will not pay for services unless there's a label. So they'll put in the recommendation, and I've seen this a ton. They won't list the diagnosis, and they'll say, no, this child needs early intervention. And then you're like, no crap, Sherlock. How do you think it's paid for?
We need the diagnosis.
Okay. So you need to kind of also be very well versed in this. So if you have a child who's under the age of 3, they go to early steps. 3 to 5, Leslie, where do they go?
They go to Child Find.
They go to Child Find. Now, what does Child Find do?
They pick up where Early Steps leaves off, and then they help transition into the regular school system, or whatever you think is appropriate for them.
Correct. Now, you have children who are so medically impacted, very few and far between, but you do have children who, for example, CP children with high rates of convulsions that even need a nurse. They will also assign a nurse to go with the child. So they will take care of all the comprehensive physical stuff too, in case, you know, anyone here has like a very complex medical case, you also know they can help take care of that too.
So Bam, I have a question because maybe I'm missing a link here that I don't understand yet. Like, for example, with William, he has United. He's 4. So when he's ready, I mean, is that Child Find something that we would refer him to, or that's just if someone doesn't have insurance, or like I'm missing something there?
We always want to make sure, because I'm recording these now, we can't use a child, you have to use initials. So no worries. Okay, so WV has United. He has completed early steps and the Child Find process. His parent has opted out enrolling him in the school system, per my recommendation.
Okay.
Because if she were to enroll him in the school system, guess what? He doesn't get intensive ABA therapy.
Yeah, he wouldn't have enough time.
He wouldn't have enough time. It would be against his benefit. And thank God I said that, because I didn't even know that pre-COVID. But post-COVID, what he was going to get like a online tutoring for an hour when the school system maybe worked and Microsoft Teams didn't die. That's what he would have been left with for the last 6.5 months.
No, but this is so much better for him.
Yeah. So it's a process and a system he still has. He still has his IEP. So whenever he, let's say at 5 years old, he decides to enroll at the local public school, he enrolls, they automatically will take his old IEP, shift him where they think it's best. I always try to update the IEP before the child goes in, because it's not fair to have him do his 3-year-old IEP. Like, he made that IEP when he was 3 years old. By the time he enrolls in the school system, he might be 5 or 6. That's not quite fair.
They'd have to evaluate him again.
They should evaluate him.
They'll still have it. He'll have it.
But by law, they have to evaluate him every 3 years.
Yes.
All comprehensive. However, I've seen that kind of extended and shenanigans when a child hasn't been enrolled in the program. So they might, let's say within a year or two, he actually would be an eligible candidate for mainstream. I would push and teach mom to push to have that evaluation done within the first 2 weeks. Because if I place that child, for example, in a cluster classroom, and that's not an appropriate setting to get out of there, sometimes it's a hassle. So I want to make sure that the child, whatever their need is appropriately met as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Or it could be the case that she can use that IEP to help her form a private school IEP if she decides to go the private school route. That can allow a little bit more flexibility. I think the nature and the way school is going to be forever changed by COVID. What it will be, I don't know. Let's see. We're in a wait and see world right now. Cool. So we know that we're supposed to refer to early steps and to Child Find. If your child is above the age of 5 or 6 and in a school and doesn't have an IEP, what happens?
You'll be waiting.
There you go, Jess. I was waiting for her to chime in and be like,
unless you have a private evaluation, you still be waiting.
even
not as long.
Private evaluation, because in the school has to validate the private evaluation.
They have 60 days to, if you come in with a private evaluation, you have 60 days for it to be reviewed. But if you don't come in with a private evaluation, you're looking at least a year.
Because there's such a high need.
Yeah. And depending on where the area of your school, do you have a good psychologist that's on top of their cases? And if they're not, there's so many factors.
All right, guys, so I'm going to stop it here so everybody has kind of a good system in place to digest. We're going to go over more kind of what are the options within the public school system, so a cluster setting versus a mainstream setting, how you go about determining whether a child to advocate for which one for a child. The other thing we're going to try to review is then the financial resources. Where do you apply for Gardner? When are you eligible? When are you not eligible? What are the things that you can do and not do? The one thing I want to include in this is also SSI or disability. Because I made this more for early learners, but for later on learners, and this will be a different topic, and I actually want to bring like the super mom expert in this because she has a child of her own, so she knows that system better than anyone. So let me see if I can get her on so she can teach you guys about what is med waiver, what is SSI, why is that appropriate, when do you apply, how do you get your kid through the system, and then what that means for their long-term care as they're older. Okay. Because by the way, a lot of people are eligible for disability income, and it's something that they should have.
It's also a separate topic when like the client has a Medicaid coverage and how to deal with, because it's completely
different. And that's an ever evolving topic in conversation, because now that system is going to change radically too, because they didn't allow for telehealth, and then, well, some Medicaids did allow for telehealth during COVID and some of them didn't.
Floridians, they allowed, because I had like some notifications like going on because of like
yeah, but some CMSs didn't. So see, it was depending. You were on Medicaid but not CMS. So then a lot of people are in CMS, not Medicaid. So then that was like a big hoopla of which was which. Cool. Alrighty, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna stop recording.